Delhi, Washington, India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, coming up in the next 30 minutes. As the tariff deadline ends, Trump sets 10% to 41% reciprocal tariffs on dozens of countries' exports, increases tariff on Canada to 35% from 25%. Global stocks mostly fall ahead of big Trump tariff deadline, despite strong earnings from US tech giants Microsoft and Meta as markets girded. US Special Envoy Witkoff meets Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu in a bid to salvage truce talks, also to visit Gaza to inspect aid delivery. Heavy rain, flash floods hit NYC and New Jersey. State of emergency declared. Over 40 million people at risk. And in cricket, Karun Nair holds fort as India stay afloat on rain-marred opening day against England on the fifth and final test at the Ovals. And on to the details now. The White House has released new tariff rates for dozens of countries, which will come into effect today. US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order imposing reciprocal tariffs ranging from 10% to 41% on imports from more than 70 countries. According to a White House fact sheet, the latest executive order not only revises reciprocal tariff rates, but also updates the schedule for when these new duties will be enforced. Well, Trump had initially set August 1st as the deadline to finalize trade deals before the new tariffs were triggered. The new rates will take effect 7 days from the order signing. However, the policy includes certain exemptions. Goods that are loaded onto ships by August 7th and reach the U.S. by October 5th will not be subject to the new rates, provided they were already in transit. And Donald Trump has raised Canada's tariff rate from 25% to 35% in a new executive order that comes into effect at midnight. According to a White House fact sheet, goods transshipped to another country to evade the new tariffs would be subject to a transshipment levy of 40%. The move is the latest blow in a months-long tariff war which Trump initiated shortly after taking power. The announcement of blaming Canada's continued inaction and retaliation comes after Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney reached out ahead on August 1st tariff deadline, but no conversations between the two took place. Trump had said any country failing to strike a deal with the U.S. before Friday will be subjected to higher tariffs imposed on goods. Meanwhile, Donald Trump gave Mexico a 90-day reprieve from higher tariffs to negotiate a broader trade deal. The extension, which avoids a 30% tariff on most Mexican non-automotive and non-metal goods compliant with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement on Trade, came after a Thursday morning call between Trump and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. He confirmed that the current tariffs, including a 25% duty on fentanyl-related goods and cars and a 50% levy on steel, aluminium and copper, will remain unchanged throughout the extension period. He further noted that Mexico had agreed to immediately eliminate its non-tariff trade barriers, which had previously hindered cross-border commerce. And U.S. Special Envoy met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday ahead of a visit to inspect aid distribution in Gaza. Witkoff has been the top U.S. representative in indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas for a ceasefire and hostage release deal. But talks in Doha broke down last week and Israel and the United States recalled their delegations. Earlier, Witkoff visited Gaza in January. Israel is under mounting international pressure to agree a ceasefire and allow the world to flood Gaza with food, with Canada and Portugal the latest Western governments to announce plans to recognize a Palestinian state. And US President Donald Trump on Thursday described the situation in Gaza as terrible. He said the United States recently contributed $60 million for food aid, but Hamas diverted money and food resources.
Oh, it's terrible what's occurring there, yeah. It's a terrible thing. People are very hungry. You know, the United States gave $60 million for food, and it's a shame because nobody, I don't see the results of it. And we gave it to people that in theory are watching over it fairly closely. We wanted Israel to watch over it. Part of the problem is Hamas is taking the money and they're taking the food. But we gave $60 million a couple of weeks ago. Nobody said anything about it.
Well, more nations joined a growing list of countries recognizing a Palestinian state in the years since recent Israel-Hamas conflict began after October 7th. About 145 of the 193 member states of the United Nations recognized Palestine as a state, but only a handful of the 27 European Union members did so before October 7th, mostly former communist countries as well as Sweden and Cyprus. The decision to recognize Palestinian statehood by Ireland, Spain and Norway, three major European nations, was mostly symbolic, but it made Israel appear more isolated on the international stage. Well, the US president is standing firm behind Israel. Trump criticized Canada's decision to recognize Palestine and place the blame for the crisis squarely on Hamas.
Well, we're going to see. No, I didn't like what they said, but, that's their opinion. I didn't like that. Not a deal breaker, but we haven't spoken to Canada today. He's called, and we'll see. But we have made a few deals today that are excellent deals for the country. We're taking in literally trillions of dollars for the country.
Well, updates now on Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia launched military strikes on Ukrainian capital Kyiv on Thursday. The strike killed 16 and wounded over 100 people. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reported that Russia launched over 300 drones and 8 missiles and praised emergency services for their continued efforts to restore life after the attacks. City authorities announced a day of mourning to be held on Friday, while Russia's defense ministry said it targeted and hit Ukrainian military airfields and ammunition depots as well as businesses linked to what it called Kyiv's military-industrial complex. Kyiv and Moscow have held 3 rounds of talks in Istanbul this year that yielded exchanges of prisoners and bodies, but no breakthroughs to defuse the conflict. And US President Donald Trump on Thursday said he plans to impose the sanctions on Moscow if no agreement can be reached. Trump has given Russian President Vladimir Putin until August 8 to make a deal, or else he will respond with economic pressure.
Yeah, we're going to put sanctions. I don't know that sanctions bother him. They know about sanctions. I know better than anybody about sanctions and tariffs and everything else. I don't know if that has any effect, but we're going to do it. Europe is extremely upset, but this is a war that should have never happened. This is a war that wouldn't have happened if I were president. And this is Biden's war. This was a stupid war to get into. Should have never gotten into this war.
On Iran's nuclear program, Donald Trump said that Iran is behaving very badly. The statement came after Tehran adopted a tougher stance and set new conditions for restarting nuclear negotiations.
Well, Iran has been acting very badly. They were decimated. Their nuclear capability, that potential, which could have happened within 3 or 4 weeks, was decimated. It's been obliterated. The Atomic Energy Commission said the place is just decimated. Now they can start again, but they'd start in different sites because they were hit.
Well, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo held the first meeting of a joint oversight committee on Thursday, taking a step towards implementing a peace deal agreed last month in Washington, even as other commitments are yet to be fulfilled. The African Union, Qatar and the United States joined the meeting of the committee in Washington, which was established as a forum to deal with implementation and dispute resolution of the peace agreement. The deal in June between Rwanda and Congo marked a breakthrough in talks held by US President Donald Trump's administration, which aims to bring an end to fighting that has killed thousands and attracted billions of dollars of Western investment to a region rich in tantalum, gold, cobalt, copper, lithium and other minerals. Well, in the Washington agreement, the two African countries pledged to implement a 2024 deal that would see Rwandan troops withdraw from eastern Congo within 90 days. And moving on, Ecuador is considering possible visa restrictions for citizens from 45 countries, including Cuba and Haiti, in a bid to help the United States reduce illegal migration. During a visit to the Quito, U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said similar restrictions on Chinese nationals traveling to the United States through Ecuador have reduced their entry at the southern border by 70%. Ecuador and the United States signed an agreement to facilitate the exchange of licensed officers to coordinate the delivery of security information for 18 months. Noem met with Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa and several of his ministers. She said Ecuador will lead the way and be a central partner in South America for the United States. Well, residents, health workers and supporters marched to Buenos Aires on Thursday to protest against government cutbacks to Argentina's public health sector. Demonstrators carried signs demanding better funding and salaries, as well as criticizing the policies of President Javier Milei on their way to the obelisk monument. Protesters warned that budget freezes and layoffs were causing a severe crisis in major national hospitals. Health professionals have long demanded better pay and working conditions, citing long hours and low wages. They also warned that public hospitals will suffer if their concerns remain ignored, with some workers already leaving or migrating due to poor conditions. And a state of emergency has been declared in New York City and New Jersey as severe thunderstorms bring heavy rain and flash flooding from New York City to Washington, D.C. Cities of New Jersey and New York continue to see the significant impacts of floods, with highways inundated, transit delays mounting, and emergency crews responding to multiple flood-related incidents. In New York, flash flooding briefly closed major roadways, delayed flights across the region, and inundated train stations throughout the metropolitan area just as the evening rush hour approached. The Weather Service attributed the storm threat to a cold front, bringing the combination of unstable air mass and atmospheric pressure to the region. The flash flooding not only disturbed the streets but also created ruckus in the subway system. Flooding in New York City created a waterfall in the underground tunnels of the subway system on Thursday. The video from social media has gone viral, which shows inside and outside of train cars under a current of water. In another video, cars are navigating through the flooded streets in New York could be seen after heavy rain swept through the city, causing localized flooding. Owing to alarming situation, New York Governor Kathy Hochul has declared a state of emergency for areas facing the threat of flash floods. And residents in the southwestern Chinese city of Chongqing sought refuge in subway stations as temperatures soared to 41.5 degrees Celsius, prompting authorities to issue a red alert for extreme heat. In subway station, people gathered to escape the sweltering heat, napping and playing cards in the cool, air-conditioned space. Tourists were also seen cooling off at fountains, under mist sprayers, and beneath a canopy made of hundreds of decorated bamboo hats. An infrared thermometer recorded a surface temperature of 129.2 Fahrenheit at a tourist site. Well, the firefighters in Portugal were making steady progress in containing a major wildfire in the wooded and mountainous Arauca region. Crews were seen working near the town of Sinfes, preventing the flames from spreading further into populated areas. Arauca, Ponte da Barca and Penamaker have burned 14,000 hectares so far, including 6,000 in Arauca alone. Over 555 fighters remained on the ground in Arauca, with more than 500 deployed in Ponte da Barca as authorities continue to battle the flames under challenging conditions. The situation remains serious, but official state containment efforts are progressing. Also, hundreds of firefighters struggled to put out wildfires raging in central Spain in the largest wave of blazes in the Iberian Peninsula so far this year after weeks of summer heat. In the western province of Cáceres, the fire has affected at least 2,500 hectares, prompting evacuations from homes scattered across the Camino Morisco area. In Spain's central province of Avila, shifting gusts of wind hindered efforts by firefighters and a special military unit. In Beltran near Avila, farmer Blas Rodriguez fought back tears as he walked among scorched trees, his olive grove devastated by the fire. And still to come in this edition of DD India Live. Monsoon session chaos continues. Opposition protests disrupt Parliament as Piyush Goyal clarified US tariff issue in Lok Sabha. India expands consular reach in US, 8 new application centers announced. And Apple revenue forecast beats estimates, tariff cost projected at $1.1 billion. Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Lupakshi Khurana. And moving on, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to visit his parliamentary constituency, Varanasi, in Uttar Pradesh on 2nd of August to inaugurate and lay the foundation stone of multiple infrastructure and development projects valued at approximately 2,200 crore rupees. The projects aimed at boosting connectivity, urban development and public amenities in the region are part of ongoing efforts to transform Varanasi into a smart and sustainable city, spanning sectors such as infrastructure, education, healthcare, tourism, cultural heritage and urban development, with key highlights including road and power upgrades, riverfront and beautification of 21 parks, 47 drinking water schemes under Jal Jeevan Mission, enhanced school and hospital facilities. Well, the monsoon session of Parliament continues to witness high drama in the national capital. Thursday saw repeated disruptions in both houses led by opposition protest. Amid the commotion, Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal addressed the Lok Sabha, clarifying India's position on the 25% tariff imposed by the United States. Here's a detailed report.
A stormy day in Parliament yet again. Both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha were marred by repeated disruptions on Thursday. Loud protests from opposition benches forced multiple adjournments throughout the day. The tension follows the conclusion of the high-voltage debate on Operation Sindoor the previous day. Amid the ruckus, Lok Sabha reconvened at 4 p.m. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal rose to address the House, speaking on a matter of critical economic importance: Washington's imposition of a 25% tariff on Indian goods under the administration of US President Donald Trump. The minister assured the House that India is closely evaluating the move and will act in the best interest of the nation.
वाणिज्य एवं उद्योग मंत्रालय निर्यातकों और उद्योग सहित सभी हितधारकों से संवाद कर इस विषय पर उनके आकलन की जानकारी ले रहा है। सरकार हमारे किसानों, श्रमिकों, एंटरप्रेन्योर्स, उद्यमी, निर्यातकों, सूक्ष्म, लघु और मध्यम उद्योगों और उद्योग जगत के सभी हितधारकों के कल्याण की रक्षा और संवर्धन को सर्वोच्च महत्व देती है। हम अपने राष्ट्रीय हितों को सुरक्षित करने और आगे बढ़ाने के लिए सभी आवश्यक कदम उठाएंगे।
Piyush Goyal later made a similar statement in the Rajya Sabha. However, sloganeering by opposition MPs continued unabated, making it difficult for proceedings to continue. The din in both houses highlighted the deepening political divide. With no breakthrough in sight, both houses were eventually adjourned to reconvene at 11 a.m. on Friday. Dipendu Mondol's report for DT India.
And today, the upper house of the parliament to take up the carriage of goods by sea bill 2025 for consideration and passing. The bill to provide for the responsibilities, liabilities, rights and immunities attached to carriers with respect to the carriage of goods by sea. The bill was passed by the Lok Sabha. Several papers were also laid in the House. Union Home Minister Amit Shah will move the resolution related to the continuance in force of the proclamation dated 13th February 2025 in respect of Manipur. The lower house of the Parliament of Lok Sabha to take up the Indian Ports Bill 2025 for consideration and passing. The bill to consolidate the law relating to ports, promote integrated port development, facilitate ease of doing business and ensure the optimum utilization of India's coastline. And India's ambassador to the United States, Ecuador, on Thursday announced the opening of 8 new Indian consular application centers across the United States, aimed at expanding access to consular services for the Indian diaspora. The Indian ambassador to the U.S., Ecuador, on Thursday announced the major expansion of Indian consular services in the U.S. beginning from Friday.
We are very happy to announce the opening of 8 new Indian consular application centers. These new Indian consular application centers would be in Boston, Columbus, Dallas, Detroit, Addison, Orlando, Raleigh, and San Jose. In addition, we would also be opening another Indian consular application center in Los Angeles very soon. With the opening of these new Indian consular application centers, our presence to provide extensive consular services and related delivery capabilities would increase and expand significantly.
Well, all the Indian consular application centers will now open on Saturdays as well. Ambassador Quadro also informed that India would also be opening another Indian consular application center in Los Angeles very soon.
Starting August 1, all the Indian consular application centers will also remain open on Saturdays. Clearly, this would help significantly enhance not just the availability of various consular services, but also their accessibility to our friends from the Indian diaspora. With the opening of 2 new consulates in Boston and Los Angeles, which the Honorable Prime Minister of India had announced a few months ago, we would be able to further strengthen not just a relationship between our 2 countries, but also our people-to-people ties, particularly in the areas of Boston and Los Angeles.
And in a clear sign of rural economic momentum, the July 2025 round of rural economic conditions and sentiment survey by India's National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development paints an optimistic picture of India's hinterland. The survey highlights a significant rise in consumption and income, with 76.6% of rural households reporting higher spending and 39.6% witnessing income growth in the past year. Both the highest ever recorded. Rural financial health is on the upswing too. 20.6% of households report increased savings. The outlook remains positive as 74.7% expect their incomes to rise in the coming year. Improved infrastructure, especially in roads, education and water access, along with continued government support, has bolstered rural resilience. Notably, inflation worries have eased, with 78.4% perceiving current inflation to be at or below 5%, pointing to enhanced price stability in rural areas. And on to some business news now. Global stocks mostly fell on Thursday despite strong earnings from U.S. tech giants Microsoft and Meta as markets girded for a key U.S. tariff deadline. While Washington has reached a tentative deal with several key countries, dozens of economies, including key commercial partners like Canada, had yet to secure U.S. tariff accords. Major U.S. indices began the day strongly, with both the S&P 500 and NASDAQ surging above closing highs, but stocks were unable to hold on to the gains, with all three indices finishing in the red. And Apple forecast revenue for the current quarter ending in September well above Wall Street's estimates on Thursday, sending shares up despite a warning from CEO Tim Cook that U.S. tariffs would add $1.1 billion in cost over the period. Sales of iPhones, the best-selling product for the company based in Cupertino, California, were up by 30.5% to $44.58 billion, beating analyst expectation of $40.22 billion. And on to some sports news now. In cricket, India scored 204 runs with the loss of 6 wickets against England and Stubbs on day 1 of the 5th and final test of the Anderson Tendulkar Trophy at the Ovals. On a seam-friendly wicket, Shubman Gill lost another toss and India were put into bat in the overcast conditions. Indian openers Jaiswal departed early while KL Rahul failed to replicate his earlier heroics in the series. All right, that's all for this edition of DD India Live. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Vipakshi Khurana from All for Intelli. Thanks for watching DD India Live.